Good Shabbos. Each week, a rabbinic group in Pittsburgh sends comments on the weekly Parsha to the prison where I visit for inmates to read and consider. This week, there was a particularly powerful teaching derived from a rather dry detail of Torah sacrificial law, and I wanted to share it with you. The Parsha of this week is Metzora, which describes how someone might bring a sacrifice to be made pure, or rather, as I've said before, qualified to engage in holiness. In Leviticus 14, it reads, "Such a person shall take 2 male lambs without blemish, 1 ewe lamb in its first year without blemish, 3/10 of a measure of choice flour to be mixed with oil for a grain offering, and 1 log of oil to be offered up." Later in the Parsha, we read, "If, however, this person is poor and his means are insufficient, he shall take 1 lamb for a reparation offering, 1/10 of a measure of choice flour to be mixed with oil as a grain offering, and a log of oil, and 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, depending on his means, to be offered up." And the author of this teaching sent to the prison, Rabbi Mendel Kalmanson, notes that not only does Jewish law allow for a smaller sacrifice based on insufficient means, but Jewish law also allows for another Jew simply to sponsor the sacrifice of the person with no means to do so on their own. And then when Maimonides, in his Code of Law, describes the details of these laws and these practices, there are deeper lessons to learn. So I want to share what he wrote. In his Laws of Atonement Requirements, Maimonides writes, "When a rich man says, 'I take responsibility for the sacrifices of this Metzora,' this afflicted person, he must bring the sacrifices not of a poor man, but of a wealthy man. For the person who took the vow has financial capacity." So how counterintuitive is that? Up until the rich man got involved, the afflicted person qualified for the Torah's price cut. So why should the cost go up just because his sponsor has a few extra bucks? Isn't the wealthy man just picking up someone else's discounted tab? The far-reaching answer is that Jewish law does not view the rich man's financial aid as an act of generosity alone, but as an act of unity. This isn't about one person helping another in need. It is about one person uncovering the other within himself. The bond revealed in these individuals is so strong that the sin of one is shared by the other, as is its rectification. But how can the Torah, a system of thought that places emphasis on personal responsibility, allow one Jew to effectively absolve another from sin? What motivates this allowance is not the notion of societal responsibility, where the privileged provide for the needy, but rather Judaism's understanding of community, where every Jew is essentially one with another. A lack in one member of the community is a lack in all. An example of this powerful idea of shared identity is the Jewish prayer book, produced by the sages, which features many prayers crafted in the plural. This was their way of declaring the needs of the entire community are the needs of each individual. And the same is true for personal shortcomings, which are transferred to the collective spiritual bank account belonging to the Jewish people as a whole. As an appropriate metaphor often employed to understand this kind of unity is the kosher status of a Torah scroll. A Torah scroll, the kosher status of a Torah scroll directly depends on each letter being kosher. If even one letter is disqualified, so is the entire scroll. So with Jewish community, for the Jewish community to be whole, every person in it has to be whole. A case in point is the central Yom Kippur prayer of atonement called Al Chet. Al Chet shekatanu lefanecha, the sin that we sin before you, the sin that we sin before you, we ask forgiveness. It's a confession. One other version begins with Hashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. We've done this, we've done that. We've done everything from Aleph to Tav, everything from A to Z. It's all in the plural. It's all we. We've done it. Even though maybe I haven't done all of that, but we've done all of that. And we are confessing about all of that. To return then to the discussion of this rich man, by choosing to pay for the sin offering of his fellow, he reveals his inner connection with the afflicted person in question, whereby he discovers in himself the need for atonement. This explains why he pays according to his own financial capacity. For at that level of peoplehood, it's not someone else's tab he's picking up, it's his own. This sheds light on one translation of a teaching that we've all sometimes heard, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Lezeh, all Israel, all members of the Jewish people are responsible for each other. Perhaps you've heard that teaching. All Israel is responsible for each other. But the word Arev, on the one hand, can mean guarantor, like we're each other's collateral. Or it could also mean mixed together. We're all mixed together with one another. The expression thus teaches that all of Israel are more than just guarantors for each other, where one person picks up another's tab. We are intrinsically connected. This teaching is also reflected in the practice of what's called Ma'od Chitin, a practice just before Passover by which the community works to make sure that every Jew has access to matzah for Passover. It is a communal responsibility to see to it that even those who cannot afford matzah or don't have access to it otherwise somehow have matzah on Passover. And actually, in the prison, that has been an issue of concern. But it looks like it's going to happen. They'll get the matzah. This is especially appropriate for the holiday of Passover when on Passover we celebrate a basic part of our master story. Our master story, the story that we tell as a community, that tells us who we are as a community. And our master story ultimately is the story of coming out of bondage in Egypt and arriving 50 days later at Mount Sinai. That's the story at the center of the Torah. In being in Egypt and then coming out of Egypt, we go through a cathartic experience that forges us into a people. We become a people, and this is reflected in a set of words we often recall on Passover. Shlach et ami, let my people go, says God. Let my people go. And we become a people in this. We have become a people by this point, and our status as a people is constantly reaffirmed in this story that we return to year after year on Passover in particular. But the story continues in one smooth motion as we approach Sinai. The story keeps on going. We go through the sea, we go into the wilderness, we want to go back, we're in the wilderness, we want to go back, we end up at Mount Sinai, we enter into a covenant and receive Torah. In that aspect of our story, we receive a call, we take on a purpose, a sense of meaning that is directly connected to who we are as a people. Our very existence as a people propels us into mitzvah. Our sense of connection with each other and our sense of purpose, our sense of connection with each other and our sense of purpose are hand in hand. Our sense of being and our sense of meaning are one, our identity and our calling. And this is signified by the second half of that very verse, which affirms that we were forged into a people through being in and coming out of Egypt. For the verse not only says, Shlach et ami, let my people go, but it always continues, Shlach et ami ve'ya'avduni. Shlach et ami ve'ya'avduni. Let my people go that they may serve me. Let my people go that they may serve me. They are my people in that they serve me. From the very start, our identity and our calling are one. This is a large part of what makes Passover such a powerful and important holiday for us. This holiday takes us back to our origins as a people and connects us simultaneously to our purpose as a people in the here and now. So it's not only about our origins, it's about the here and now. And maybe that's also why this Shabbat, which is the Shabbat before Passover, is called Shabbat Hagadol, the great Shabbat, the great Shabbat. You think any other Shabbat would be a great Shabbat, but I mean, this is the great Shabbat. The major mitzvah of the Passover story, the major mitzvah of the Passover holiday is to tell this story. To tell this story in many ways with all its many corollaries. I mean, telling the story is a mitzvah. It's directly spoken of in the Torah. You shall tell your children. And that is at the core of what the Seder is. And of course, the book we use is called the Haggadah, which means the telling. And we speak not only of coming out of Egypt, but we speak of in every generation a Pharaoh rises up against us, yet God frees us with an outstretched arm. We speak of how each of us is to think of ourselves as if we each came out of Egypt. And we speak of how we are not to oppress the stranger, for we too were strangers in the land of Egypt. Passover is all about now. It's about the forever now. The now that was, and the now that is, and the now that will be. So it is appropriate and meritorious, as the Haggadah itself says, to dwell upon and expand upon the story and to tell stories of liberation in various forms as they have happened to us and our ancestors in many different ways in many different places. To contemplate what redemption in the future might look like, especially as we welcome Elijah to the table. And it's appropriate to empathize with those who suffer alongside us through these events of liberation, sometimes terribly costly events of liberation, such as in our origin story, when the Egyptians suffered the 10 plagues, especially the death of the firstborn, for which we remove drops of wine from our cup of joy. And also when so many people in the Middle East are staring death in the face today. Pesach is a very joyful holiday for us, celebrating liberation in the face of enslavement, or sometimes in the midst of enslavement. Yet just as we draw wine away from our cups of joy in the Passover Seder for each plague, so do we temper our joy in times of war and suffering. and that has to include this year too. As we do that, it becomes even more important for us to pour even more intent into the hope represented by Elijah, a hope for a Passover of the future, so that at the end of the Seder, we can truly proclaim with all our hearts, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, Ir Shalom, a city of peace. Shabbat Shalom. Chag Sameach.